franchise secrets. Erik Von Horn.
Hey, in this episode of Franchise Secrets, I have my good friend Trent Halvorson on. He's with FranChoice, and that is one of the consultant/broker networks out there. And I wanted him on because I want to talk to a couple different groups. I want to talk to franchisors that are wanting to grow and they're thinking about using consultants to do that. I also wanted to talk to buyers out there who are working with consultants and maybe who should not be working with a consultant. So I started to ask him that, like, who should not be working with a consultant as a franchisor or a franchise buyer should not work with a consultant. So we got into a lot of different topics and around consultants and how they're paid, all kinds of fun stuff. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Franchise Secrets with my friend Trent. And I think you'll find it really, really helpful if you are a franchise buyer, a franchisee, or a franchisor. Man, you're such a good friend. And we've known each other since, for a long time when you got into franchise. You've helped so many people get into franchising. You're like, the key man over there at FranChoice, one of the top consultant networks, broker networks out there. Jeff's all right too. Jeff Elton, he's all right. Linda, she's pretty good too. Tony, he's all right. But Trent, you're the man of the hour. I get so many people asking about brokers and consultants and the networks and all of that kind of stuff. So I figured you and I would just have just a chat, just to educate franchisees, franchisors, and franchise buyers on consultants and networks and things like that. So sound good?
Sounds great.
So how would you describe a consultant or a consultant network?
Yeah, I think what's been thrown out there before is, it's kind of like a realtor. You're going to go find a house, you're going to use a realtor, and you kind of hone in what you think you want. 3 bedrooms, 3 baths, these characteristics. Or it's like a headhunter. Hey, I want to go find a job. So you're going to find something that's going to help you in that process. But, I think when it comes down to it, our consultants help individuals or investors find business opportunities that are franchises that best fit what their background is, what their desires, and what they really want to achieve with that business. And they take some time and build a relationship and really make sure they're checking a lot of boxes. And most people, franchising model business is not right for them. And that's a great learning experience to go through.
So there's a number of different consulting broker networks out there. What's the difference between a consultant and a broker? Like I get that question a lot. Everyone's like, well, they're really just brokers. They're really just they're not really consultants. They are consultants. They're not, blah, 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 blah. Like in your mind, what's the difference between a consultant and a broker, or is it just semantics? I didn't even say that right.
There's probably a definition. My mind, when you hear that broker, is they're brokering the deal. Hey, I'm helping the buyer and the seller, and I'm brokering this deal. So when you think consultant, it's more of a coach, advisor, which are also sometimes names thrown around here. But you're helping out an individual, make sure they're checking the boxes, asking the right questions. I call it a smart friend. When you get into a new experience, you want a smart friend. I think you used to talk about shortcutting, spending some money to shortcut the learning process. And I think that's what consultants help with, amongst other things.
All right. So we'll get into the different types of networks out there. But I get, over at Front Street Equity Partners, we're always talking to new franchisors, people that are wanting to franchise their business because they're looking at working with us. And they know that we have great relationship with networks like FranChoice and others. But I love to send people to you, young franchisors, mature franchisors that want to grow through the consultant network. Because I know when they talk to you, they're probably going to get rejected. They're probably going to hear things why they shouldn't join a network like that. So let's talk about some of those reasons a brand should not be a part of FranChoice. We'll just say FranChoice, because I mean, that's who you are, and that other consultant networks might be right for them. But I love how you talk people and brands out of it right away. So take that where you want to.
Yeah, I think one of the early on conversations we have is just kind of the buckets we look at, and then what specifically inside those buckets. So, for instance, unit economics. Let's dive into unit economics. Hey, what's your all-in investment? What can you make? And then we stack that across other brands we work with, and it needs to be in the ballpark. Oftentimes, that will take an opportunity that might be a big investment with a low output for the first 5 years. It's not going to stack up. So we do a deep dive on unit economics. Next is territory. We're looking for territory of 36 states or more. Oftentimes, sometimes smaller brands, they say, hey, we want to grow regionally. We want to stay in the state that we're founded in and add 20, 30 locations and then grow the next state out. And that's great. I think it's very strategic. We just are looking for majority of the US. So territory would be that second bucket. And the third bucket is sales process. And then I usually include D-Day, confirmation day as well. And here's usually where the brands get hung up, where I say, okay, who's full-time job, or 2 or 3 people full-time job to work with candidates, knowing that you might be able to work with 18, maybe 25 candidates at a time. And then what does that process look like? It should be a very systematic process. I call it follow the yellow brick road. Step 1, step 2, step 3, usually 6 to 8 steps or phone calls that you're going to have with a candidate. And that's not what people have for the most part. Getting involved with, groups like yourself where you guys, hey, we know how to sell franchises and we can help kind of organize. That's great. So we'll say that third bucket is sales process to include discovery day, confirmation day. And what we're looking for there is future looking statements. So you have a confirmation day and your marketing individual says, hey, once you sign, you're going to start working with me, and here's what we're going to do for you. Real estate. Once you sign, here's what I'm going to do for you in your market that you're going to open up. Therefore, that candidate starts to say, all right, geez, I'm going to sign, and then I'm going to have all this support. So that is just a very future forward looking. And sometimes people think of that connotation of discovery. I have to learn something that I've already learned or should have already learned. So we take that confirmation day and say it needs to be a future looking event. And then validation, whether you have just corporate locations and you can validate with vendors or GMs, or you have franchisees, what does the validation process look like? And then what does it look like if you have 5 people in the pipeline or 50 people in the pipeline? How do you get a structured validation process? And by that time, most of these franchisors are going, oh, I've got a lot to work on. And then we help them out. We've got best practices and all kinds of emails we can help with some of that structure. And then the bonus questions are the leadership. What's their track record? What's their experience? And then financial strength of the organization. Because when you grow and when you grow fast, it puts financial strain. And we want to know what kind of resources they'll have to put towards that growth.
Let's talk about leadership, because I think both franchisors, if they're listening to this and like, I think I want to go into the broker network or I want to scale faster, and then also talk to the potential franchisees of looking at a new emerging brand to look at their leadership team. So what do you look for in a leadership team?
Yeah, the first thing is who's listed. Is it just one CEO, founder, director, managing partner, and kind of, one-man band? Or is there 5 or 6 people? And then looking at their experience, where did they come from?
When you say listed, you're talking about on the website for one thing, but in the FDD.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. So then we look at the individual. So it could be 3 people, it could be 6 people. And if it is 3 people, then we'll say who else is on the team, who else is supporting. Maybe they've got field folks and other people in the office. And we really want to know how many people at the headquarters, at the franchisor level, supporting how many franchisees, and then what's the process to add when they grow with franchisees to make sure the support does not decrease. But then we go deep and say, what was their previous experience? Was the chief marketing officer, last role in a franchisor marketing, or was it in a big box retailer, or was it in a service-based business? And just making sure it makes sense, because marketing's tough these days, and you want to have, that individual top notch to make sure you can gain customers through marketing.
So let's say that CMO, full-time or fractional, was working at Best Buy at the corporate office before, or they were working at a brand that went from 30 units to 100 plus units as the CMO. Like, how do you view those two different people?
Yeah, I think coming from Best Buy, I would be curious to say, hey, how are you then gaining the knowledge and the experience on that market, that ground level franchisee? Because it might be Florida might grand open tomorrow, and you might have Denver grand opening. And what does that look like? And dealing with maybe not a team of 50 people. So what resources are you utilizing? And then what's their track record with the corporate location? What have they been able to generate from an open location? And then mainly, how does that vary by market? Because that's the big thing with franchising is you're in a lot of different markets and your customer could be a little bit different. So a marketing strategy in Miami might need to be tweaked for Des Moines, Iowa. And just making sure they're cognizant of that. And then they have the resources to deploy the right marketing message to, attract those customers.
All right, let's talk brands out there. If this is interesting to you on the broker networks, how often do you take calls? I mean, like, when should somebody call you?
I would say earlier the better, because we can start road mapping things that need to get accomplished. Most folks that call, it's probably a 3 to 6 month phone conversation. But I've had conversations with people for 3.5, 4 years before we've kind of joined forces and launched their brand. And some I'm still talking to that might be at 7 years. And we're still trying to get the right growth and the foundation laid of franchisees that will then have the income that they need to support the could be rapid growth with a consultant network.
So if you're a brand and you're thinking about, just curious about consultant networks, it's worth just reaching out to Trent. How do people reach out to you, Trent?
FranChoice.com. There's a link. If you scroll down to the bottom, it'll say franchisors interested in joining. There's a little form you can fill out, and that'll go to me, and I'll reach out and definitely have a conversation early. But typically it's 25 to 50 open locations. Sometimes it works at 10, but I would say ideally 25 open locations.
So the reason I'm kind of bringing this up, because most of the time on the podcast, I don't this is not a pitch, because I know for franchisors, you will get help from Trent and others. If you want introduced to other people in other networks, just reach out to me, and I'm happy to make introductions to other networks, because there's not just FranChoice out there. But I know and trust Trent, and he's not, as I said earlier, he's not out there to sell you on it. He's out there to just educate you when the time is right. Most of the time, FranChoice is one of the last consultant networks that people get into just because of the requirements that they have. But they provide a lot of value if it's something that you're thinking about. All right. So let's talk about franchise buyers, people that are thinking about buying a franchise. Why would they use a consultant versus not use a consultant? So give some reasons not to use a consultant, why they shouldn't use a consultant, and then maybe reasons why they should. Yeah,
and I all mine will probably go to why they should.
You have to give me something, man. You have to give me something why they should. I think maybe they really hate the word consultant and they love the word broker. Maybe that's a good reason, but you have to give me something.
Yeah. I think typically that folks that know what they want, right? If I'm going on a car lot and I know I want a Toyota 4Runner, my mind's made up. I've probably done some research at home and I'm set on everything because it's right for my family and it's going to accomplish everything I need. I can probably walk into a Toyota dealership and say, hey, I need that. So I think oftentimes this is typical. I want a Chick-fil-A. That one comes up quite a bit, or McDonald's. I've done research. I might have family members, friends that own one, so I want one too. And I'm well-versed on what I'm getting into. Have at it, go get in and learn and get into those systems. And typically it's I don't want to say legacy systems, but it's the larger one, right? It's the big brands that you see all over the United States. So that would be, you probably not going to learn much from a consultant. But
another one is, let's stick on the why they shouldn't use a consultant, because this puts a little pressure on you. And I kind of like you feeling a little uncomfortable. So this is good. Why selling against consultants. But another one is like, if you want to get into fast food, like if that's something that you want, typically consultants don't work with fast food. Although there are some, QSRs and food type concepts that would be worth listening to with a consultant. But typically if you want a Jimmy John's, you want a KFC, you want a McDonald's, some of the bigger legacy food brands, they are not going to be in the consultant network. So that would be a reason not to use a consultant. You got to give me one more. Or comment on that.
No, I totally agree. And I think what you'll see too is like those restaurants, they quickly form larger groups. And you might see somebody come in and buy one, and then all of a sudden get with a group of 3 or 4, and all of a sudden it turns into owning 16. I think that's very typical in that QSR space that, hey, we're going to own a large market or several across several states. And it becomes almost a business owning a business. To really simplify and just have the growth to support 10, 15, 20 locations in that QSR space. So absolutely right.
All right. So I made you squirm a little bit. Now make you happy. What are some of the reasons why people should use a consultant?
Yeah. And even going back to just venturing out, like if you want a McDonald's, I think there's a lot to be learned. Most of the consultants out there have been franchisees, have either been the franchisor or sat in a franchisor seat in some capacity, or have owned their own business. So I think, like I say, I describe consultants to my friends and family as having a smart friend as you go out and learn something new. It's not common. It might be common to buy a car and a house, but it's not common to go look at buying a business. Like that's a far reach for a lot of individuals to do. So going out and doing something new, having somebody next to you that's either done it before or understands what steps you should be taking, right? If we just looked at validation and having, hey, I can ask these questions. Maybe we provide, 16 great questions to ask and more, versus just letting the franchisor tell you, hey, up next, we're going to do these validation calls and there's 4 of them scheduled, and not fully understanding what that's all about. And then I think just understanding the process from start to finish. 1, it is a process. And 2, they're making a decision about you just as much as you're wanting. And again, having that smart friend kind of walk you through. There's going to be times that you get very excited, and there's going to be times that you want to walk away. And having that consultant, or it could be a spouse that, right, is viewing this in a different capacity, and you have somebody to talk to, going through the journey at the same time with, and his experience in buying or the franchising model just helps overall.
I would say another reason to use a consultant, if you think you know what you want, but you're not 100% convinced, you don't know what you don't know, then a consultant would really be able to help, because they're probably going to refer you to brands that you may have never heard of before or never thought about before. And also these brands have gone through the selection process that you've, talking to franchisees, reviewing, the financial stuff that you dive into and whatnot. So there's brands that have been through a level of due diligence, and then there are also these brands that, you're probably not going to just pick off of entrepreneur.com and be like, this is the one. And so then there's just a lot of value that consultants can add. Now, I'll say good consultants, experienced consultants, trained consultants can add a lot of value. I would say if you're just getting thrown a bunch of brands and say, go research these, when I say a bunch, like 5, 6, 7, 8 brands, that's probably not a helpful consultant. That's a consultant that's probably newer or inexperienced, or just is not doing it as part of their main thing.
No, that's spot on. And I think that's where a lot of individuals seek to find a consultant that says, hey, I believe I want a business in the franchising model, but I don't know where to start. 4,000, 5,000, whatever the number is of businesses out there, how to go about getting, into their sales process. Is it just filling out an application on the website? No one's calling me back. How about fund this business? What are my options? And all of these things. Yes, consultants, the good ones do an amazing job getting all the ducks in a row and really kind of filtering out the noise of, all right, this is kind of what I hear you talking about from a characteristic standpoint. And this business offers those characteristics.
I also say the best consultants are probably working a lot of referrals. They are not in my Facebook group trying to get leads, which happens all the time. So if you are getting pitched in my Facebook group, call me, DM me. I've got something really cool to show you. They are probably not, they're hunting for business like that. They're probably not a top consultant that has been doing it for a long time. That's going to be super helpful. They are trying to use Facebook to try to get leads. And I've just seen that. And I really want to help people get introduced to the right consultant. And I do that. If people reach out to me, I'm like, hey, I can refer you to a couple of consultants that are amazing. And I do that. And I also delete posts in the Facebook group. By the way, if you want to join the Facebook group, it's franchisesecretsgroup.com, and there's 5,000 plus people in there. Trent's in there. I think you are, unless you got out of there.
I'm in there.
What would you say? Like, how would you, if you, knowing what you know now, but you weren't a part of the franchise community and you were looking for a franchise consultant, how would you go about finding one?
Yeah, I think some people like to work with somebody local. Hey, if I'm in Minneapolis, maybe a big concern of mine is I want somebody local that knows my market just as well as I know it. They might have some insight. Or it's going to be, hey, maybe I'm after a service-based business. I believe I want service or brick and mortar. So I want to find somebody that has great experience in a lot of service-based or brick and mortar. And I think, to your point of sometimes folks have a lot of experience in this space and sometimes they don't, is reading their bios and asking a lot of questions. And I go back to the realtor of, hey, when, you go, hey, I got to find a house, and a lot of referrals come in and, all of a sudden it's, hey, Bob lives 3 houses down. He's been a realtor for 25 years. And he knows the market. He knows the metro area. Like, there's all these things that people say on a good, realtor, on a good consultant. And you can read that, hey, they've been doing this for 22 years, or they've been doing this for 22 months, or, they've been a franchisee, they've owned businesses and things like that you can kind of pick up on. And then I think at the end of the day, how did the first couple conversations go? You're going to get to know them. They're going to get to know you. And there's either a bond where you kind of go, yeah, he's picking up what I'm putting down. He's listening to what I'm saying, or he's not. And you can go your separate way. But yeah, there's some amazing consultant, coach, advisors, brokers out there that help people find that right business.
Attention, franchisors and franchisees. There are 2 really important resources that I want to share with you that will help you avoid costly mistakes and increase your enterprise value. The first is our free Facebook group. It's a community that has over 4,000 franchisees and franchisors in it. When somebody asks a question, they get honest and authentic answers from multiple perspectives. You can join the group for free over at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. The second resource I want to share with you is if you're a franchisee and you want to be around a community of successful Zs and other brands and in other industries, this is why I created the Franchisee Mastermind. If you want access to the best single and multi-unit owners to know what they're doing, or if you want to be around other multi-brand owners, then you'll want to check out my Franchisee Mastermind. The reason why people join is they want access to my Rolodex, my connections, to each other. They want a shortcut success, both short-term and long-term. Links will be in the show notes or at scalablefranchise.com.
All right. So if you are working with somebody and they're giving you some brands and then you're just not feeling it and you want to work with somebody else, what's protocol? Like, should you work with 2 to 3 to 20 consultants, or should you just work with one, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, I would say one at a time. I mean, learning about yourself around what you're looking for in a business, learning about brands that gets probably close to 25 to 40 hours a week if you're putting in the time and the effort, and trying to do that, times 2 just doesn't work. And I think you're not listening and you're not participating with each individual. So I think If one's not working out, politely decline their service. I no longer need your service. Thank you. I've learned a lot, or I appreciate your time that you've put into me. I'm going to go separate ways now. I think you can close that chapter and then find somebody that's, that you gel well with. And like I said, if you go through and follow their process, it's significant time during a week, and maybe it's 10 to 25 hours a week. But it requires a lot of work and dedication if you're going to go do that in a business ownership.
So brokers only work with a limited number of brands, or you could say they work with a large selection of brands. Same difference. So some people are like, well, they're only going to refer me to the brands that they work with. Is that true? And how limiting is that?
In most cases, I would say yes, absolutely true. You might come into a conversation and they're sharing things, what to look for and how to do validation calls. And you might say, all right, I'm going to go back to Chick-fil-A and use everything I've learned. And they're going to say, great, do it. Best of luck and call me if you have questions. But yes, they're not going to follow the process and then say, all right, I'm going to go, register, connect with my contacts at Chick-fil-A. They'll be reaching out. So you're right. They are limited to what they can show you. They kind of like what houses are on the market. Not too many realtors are going to go start knocking on doors to say, hey, do you want to sell? It does happen. But in most cases, the realtors have what's available for sale. And most consultants have where they have relationships built. So yes, they have, I'll say limited. But at the end of the day, I think as you start to look for characteristics, you're going to kind of check every type of business that somebody could want. These folks will have access to.
All right, let's talk about money. Brokers aren't just doing this out of the kindness of their own hearts. There's money involved with this. The franchisor, and correct me if I'm wrong, franchisor is paying fees to a consultant that is this buyer eventually buys that particular brand. So can you comment on the fees and at the end of the day, from a buyer's perspective, if I'm buying a franchise, I want to make sure that nobody else is getting a better deal because they are not using a broker. So can you kind of comment on some fees and that piece of it?
Yeah, you bet. So the fees are paid by the franchisor. And it does not cost the franchisee, the candidate coming into a system, anything. The franchisor is paying it essentially out of a marketing bucket, a customer acquisition bucket, if you will, that they're saying this is what a new franchisee is worth. And I would say oftentimes it probably falls within the lines of their all-in investment would probably be close to what a realtor might make on an all-in investment. So I think sometimes people talk about in relationship to the franchise fee, but I think at the end of the day, the franchisor is getting a new franchisee, and that investment that franchisee is going to have to make, whether it's brick and mortar, might be $250, $350, $550, $1 million plus dollars. So I would look at it as that new franchisee is now buying a business for all in $1 million that's going to sit down here on the street corner, and that franchisor paid to acquire that new franchisee. No different than a franchisor running a, $25, $50, $100,000 marketing campaign, trying to find a franchisee and hoping to get one out of it as well.
Well, let's look at it that way. So we just looked at it from the buyer's perspective to give them an idea of it. And that's good for franchisors to understand how buyers look at it. Let's talk about how franchisors should be looking at it too. Because one, it's basically a no risk. Like you are not paying unless there's performance, right? There's going to be some different fees, and different networks have different types of fees, but they're minimal fees. But you're really paying for performance. If there's a franchise that is sold, then that franchisor will pay for that. And they're going out there and spending money on Google and Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, Wall Street Journal, all of those types of things, or all the portals, they have budgets set aside to get a lead for that. And and they may or may not get a franchisee out of the 100 or 200 leads that they get from these particular, sources out there. So that's how I kind of look at it when we're looking at it with our brands over at Front Street Equity Partners. The acquisition cost, and then just the risk associated with that. So how do you talk about that to franchisors?
Yeah, and I think it's you're a huge advocate around time is money. And right. So yes, you might throw a marketing campaign because you want a new franchisee in Minneapolis, and you go strong and you do all of the marketing campaigns that you can, and you might be 50 or 100K in with all the channels and no guarantee. And now all of a sudden it's the 20 leads, the 100 leads, the 2,000 leads. Now I have to go in and process and connect with and have all of those conversations. And I'll use the word pre-screen all these individuals, and then get maybe 50 of those folks into your pipeline, and then educate all 50 in hopes that you acquire a new franchisee. So I think, yes, from the consultant group, you are paying once that is a transaction and you've now added a franchisee. But I also say from a time standpoint, it's more efficient or effective as well from a pipeline perspective.
All right. What else? What else have we not talked about around the broker community, brands, things like that? What are some of the things that you think would be interesting?
I think one of the benefits, and I don't think
about it until one of the benefits. I was going to go to one of the big pitfalls. I was going pitfalls. You're going benefits. All right.
Okay.
All right.
You can go second then. In this one, it's aha for me every time I hear it. The candidates get callbacks, right? So a consultant makes an introduction to a brand, and all of a sudden that same day they've heard. And sometimes these individuals have done the online application and people don't call them back. They get zero information from the franchisors off the webpage. I've had friends go through this where they go, hey, why, when I fill out this form, where does it go? Because no one's contacted me in a week, in 2 weeks. And then they work with a consultant. It's like, man, the first day somebody reached out, they gave me a history video, and tomorrow I'm talking to somebody to learn more. And I think we take that for granted in this space, that just happens. That's the way the process happens. That, again, 3,000, 2,000 other opportunities, you can't get in to learn about the brand.
All right, let's talk about just kind of where we are. We got high interest rates right now. There's different shifts in people that are buying franchises. Sometimes there's people have a ton of equity in their homes, and they get cheap home equity lines. And then there's different types of loans out there that are, from the SBA or whatever. There's all kinds of different ways to finance these things. The economy does play a factor. When it's booming, there's less people that are really buying because a lot of people have jobs. But then when jobs are, they're getting let go of their jobs, and they are thinking, man, maybe I should be an entrepreneur, or maybe this is the chance that I'm going to take. They kind of go into it. So economy plays a factor. Where have we been? Where are we now? And where are we going with the economy and franchise sales?
So I've sat in this seat for 10 years, and COVID took a small dip. And since then, more and more individuals are continuing to look at business ownership through franchising. You're absolutely right. I was just pulled up an article where the interest rate hit 7.09. I think today, but I think, yes, the interest rates, just the whole home mortgage, it plays a huge place. I think jobs in general, whether there's layoffs or potential layoffs to, right, this bottom edge of the baby boomers that exist, and then just those executive level positions of, I'm just going to call it 50 plus. That's not old, but 50 plus, I think they're continuing to look over their shoulder to say what happens. So, and stock market. I think with the instability across all of those channels, people are trying to take control of their future with a business through franchising, because there's control there. And whether they're sitting at home now and they want to do it full time, or they have a job and saying, hey, it's so uncertain what the next couple of years. I'm going to start now. So in 2 or 3 years, if a layoff happens, if I need to jump ship, I've got this thing built and running. The stock market, I just not sure what's going to happen there. They invest, call it in themselves, or into a business. Yeah. The number of people on a daily basis that continue to look at franchising as an option for control of their own destiny continues to increase.
Let's talk about industries. How have you seen industries change, like interest in different industries? What was hot, what's hot now, and where do you see interest in the near future?
Yeah. So again, pre-COVID, I'll say brick and mortar was hot. Anything brick and mortar, we're talking hair care, boutique fitness, anything that had 4 walls seemed to be really consistent, really great. There were even some frozen treat spaces in there that were just unbelievable. And then COVID, and we saw home services just explode. I think, right, that small dip, and then it was like, hey, I want to do anything in my house because that feels like I'm going to be here for a little bit. So home services took off, and now it's kind of plateaued, and a lot of the brick and mortar stuff's coming back. The commercial real estate, I think there's been some great grabs out there. So people feel really well that, one, people are out shopping again and doing activities, whether it's the fitness realm or going out to physical locations. But home services is really strong. I think what it did was open our eyes to say, hey, how many great businesses exist in the home services space? And a lot of those do touch on some B2B opportunities, but for the most part, a lot of it is focused on the home.
Salespeople, franchise developers, anyone that's helping somebody buy a franchise. So, talk about like what makes a great franchise development person.
Yeah,
I know you see a lot of them. I know you've had. I mean, you get to see a lot of them. You get so much feedback from the consultants and from people that have purchased franchise. So, like, there's probably nobody better to talk about what makes a really good franchise development person than you. And so, think about this. Talk about it from the frame of somebody buying. How do they know they're working with somebody really good that's helping them? And then the franchisor, new franchisor. How do I know that I've got somebody really good that's on my team helping me sell franchises?
Yeah. So I think the first thing that comes to mind is you're on an airplane, you start talking to the person next to you, and then next thing you know, you're landing. And you've just built an unbelievable relationship. You're like, I don't know if I should give you my phone number or my home address. I feel like we've been friends since kindergarten. So I think somebody that can build relationships and just have a really cognitive conversation with somebody that says, hey, I understand where you're coming from and I understand where you want to go. So that relationship has to be key. And then second, I think oftentimes they say, right, franchise development, franchise sales. I like the word franchise educator. I'm going to educate you on our brand because that's what you're doing. I can't sell you a brand, Erik, right? If you don't want to buy a car wash or a brick and mortar location, I can't sell it to you. Even how good I am, I can't sell it to you. But what I can do is educate you on the brand I have. Hey, Erik, this is how we market. Hey, Erik, this is how we build out your location. Hey, Erik, this is how we get you customers. I'm educating. So I think what I would be looking for is, hey, do I have a strong educator? Sometimes they come on operations and they can follow that process of, hey, here's what phone call 1 looks like. Here's what 2, along the lines of building a relationship. And at the end of the day, yes, they have to have a little bit of a sales backbone because at some point I'm going to say, Erik, how does this all sound? Do you want one? And if you can't do that, all I want to do is keep talking to Erik, then that's not going to go anywhere. And that, maybe that 4-week sales process turns into 40 weeks and nothing happens. But relationship, definitely there, educator, and then sales, kind of 3 characteristics that come to mind for me.
So a buyer goes into this. A lot of times, my arms are crossed right now. Like I'm going to get sold on something. They're going to try to sell me because some brands out there are really trying to sell and some are really looking at, do I really want this person as my franchise partner. I'm going to have to live with them for the next 10 years. And do I really want them as a franchisee in my system? So I remember being in a discovery day, confirmation day, when I was on the development side. I had somebody that they were just a disaster. Like, he had money, but he was going to be a horrible franchisee. We just knew it. We don't always know it, but this one, like, we just knew it was going to be a disaster. His son was going to do something, and nobody knew anything that was going on. The guy was bound for failure. And so we said, no. We called up the consultant and we said, this person is not approved. And the consultant, I'm not going to say what network it was with, was like, you've got to be kidding me, furious with us. But at the same time, respected us because he knew that we meant what we said. And then we had to tell this guy, you're not approved. Tears, Trent, tears from a grown man that did not get approved. And this was a newer emerging brand that I was working with. But I was so proud of the founder that said, no, this is going to be a long-term disaster. We're not going to take short-term money for a long-term headache. And but I know that you hear those types of stories. So can you speak to the skeptic out there that thinks all of these franchisors are just here to sell me versus it really being a two-way street?
Yeah, I love this conversation. It's one that I always talk to the founders, president. Somebody needs to run quality control. Period. End of story. And for that reason, you have to look at this individual and say, hey, are they going to match the ethics, the values? Are they going to be in my top 10? Right. And look in the mirror and say, this decision falls on me if I say yes. And it's that of quality control, and regardless if they're working with an FSO or if they have a 1099 salesperson or, maybe a founder just isn't engaged with the sales process and they're meeting people at confirmation day and they're trying to make a decision in a couple hours, somebody has to run quality control. And if no one does, then what I usually say is set aside 10% of all of your deals, because every 10 people, you're going to have to refund one. You're going to have at least a 10% error on 10 people. So you're going to have to write them a check because you'll want them to go away. But if you bank on it and prepare for it, it's not going to sting as bad, or you can just have quality control throughout the process.
What are some of the biggest mistakes franchisors make? One that I'd like you to kind of talk about is awarding too many territories to the wrong people. So can you talk about that one?
Yeah. And I just wrote down too many territories. So that's what I see oftentimes, that's just it. It's a new franchisor and somebody comes in with typically a lot of money, maybe no track record in franchising, and they want 5 or 10. I want to buy the market. And I sit back and I go, okay, typically a development schedule on 10 is 5 years plus, and sometimes just 10 years. So if you look at that franchisor to say, let's just take Dallas, and you sell 10 to one person, and let's say you have a tight development schedule and you get 10 open in 5 years, which probably doesn't happen, but that's best case scenario. Now you sell 3 3-packs, or we just say you sell to 4 different people 3-packs. So now you've got 12 in the Dallas metro. Typically you're looking at about 3 years, maybe 4 years. Now you're going to have 12 open, but here's where it gets better is the franchisees. The power of having 4 franchisees, the diverse in thought and experience all comes to the market in Dallas, raises the level of not only Dallas, but the franchisor as well. Now, what I would tell franchisors to say, hey, that guy that wants 10 today, by the time he gets 3 open, he'll have the opportunity to buy more in other markets. Or sometimes it's the neighbor that opens up 3 that says, hey, I want to move out of Dallas. I want to move somewhere else. So I'll sell you my, if for a good franchisee, there's always going to be more opportunity to acquire more locations. And that could be dirt and growing them from the ground up. or it could be existing locations. A franchisor will always take care of their great franchisees. But 5 and 10 is really tough for me to swallow, knowing the speed to open happens with the number of franchisees and not the number of territories sold.
All right. So Jeff Elgin, founder of FranChoice, one of the smartest guys in franchising that I know, somebody that I consider a mentor, somebody that I've looked up to, and I'll call for random advice when needed. I know you feel very much the same way. What are some of the nuggets of wisdom that you've learned from Jeff over the years?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to just process. He has sold a lot of franchises in his day, and just the ability to say, hey, you can structure a sales process. You're the guide, right? You're the conductor and you're the educator, and that's what you're doing. And I think when you take that approach, right, it takes that sales approach, and it really just says, hey, Erik, we're going to go through a journey in the next 4 weeks. We're going to have about 6 to 8 phone calls. I'm going to look for, 20 to 40 hours of your time. We're going to educate you on what we have to offer. And it just really takes that notch of, right, that crossed arm, I'm going to get sold here, versus, hey, we're going to learn together. I'm going to learn about you and you're going to learn about our system. And it does so much to really just get two people engaged on one thing. And it's saying, hey, is this the right vehicle for you to achieve on what you're looking to in the future? He's just a phenomenal. Anytime we have sales process questions, it's a quick phone call, and he can give you 3 examples on how to attack it or how to address it.
Trent, thanks for coming on, man.
Erik, thanks for having me. Great. Touching base again, and love watching what you're doing with the Franchise Secrets.
Thanks for listening to the Franchise Secrets podcast. Links to everything can be found over at franchisesecrets.com. And if you want my help with anything from starting your own franchise to growing your current franchise business, please visit scalablefranchise.com.